have to unmute. All right, now that I'm unmuted, oops. This is where we ask questions of the presentation, make comments about the presentation. I don't see anybody new, so everybody knows pretty much what to do, how to do it. Crystal's iPad.
So it's interesting to me that Hagar could not fulfill the promise. And we see that in the book of Galatians. We're the of the promised seed, not the physical seed. So that's Paul's big argument with the faction of the circumcised is you guys are all thinking about flesh and blood. I'm talking about something that's a whole lot bigger, a whole lot more bigger.
Do you want me to share screen and go to Galatians 4?
Please.
Okay.
Because if you only select those that are physically Jewish, physically from Israel, leave out the majority of humanity. Paul made an argument that he said the seed was singular, it was not plural. The promise that Abraham sought was the Messiah, not Isaac.
Somebody volunteers to read from 22 to 31.
I can do it. Just tell me when to stop.
22 to 31, all of it.
For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by a bondmaid, the other by a free woman. But he who was of the bondwoman was born after the flesh, but he of the free woman was by promise. Which things are an allegory? For these are the two covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, which gendereth bondage, which is Hagar. For this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and answereth to Jerusalem, which now is, and is in bondage at this time with her children. But Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all. For it is written, rejoice, thou barren that bearest not. Break forth and cry, thou that travailest not. For the desolate hath many more children than she which hath an husband. Now we, brethren, as Isaac was, are the children of promise. But as then, he that was born after the flesh persecuted him that was born after the Spirit. Even so it is now. Nevertheless, what saith the Scripture? Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be an inheritor with the son of the free woman. So then, brethren, we are not children of the bondwoman, but of the free.
Thank you very much, Alan. My throat was dried up. Thank you for stepping in.
Sure.
Phil, you want to discuss this or?
Yes. So if we place our faith in the keeping of the law, I'm not saying you don't keep the law. You do keep the law. Emphatically, you must keep the law. But if that's your faith, then you're in bondage. We at least I perceive that we're called to a bigger calling, and that is to find out how to apply all the law and mercy and justice, not just by the letter of it. And it's very interesting that we are supposed to be the children of the promise. And that rolls back to the times. Who did he promise to? Why isn't it the covenant made unto Sarah? Why isn't it the covenant made unto Sarah? She had to believe too. Her name got changed. And that goes right back to what God has joined together, let no man separate. He joined Sarah and Abraham, not Sarah, Hagar, and Abraham. So God had brought Sarah to Abraham for a lifelong mate. They went to chase after the flesh to try to fulfill a promise they'd already made and got short. So I see many promises made to women, and the plan of God cannot occur without them. If Sarah would have said, no, I'm done, I ain't doing that. You can't make me have a baby at 100. This would all been null and void, but she didn't do that. So there's a great lot of lessons to be learned here. And also, if you study Abraham's life, there's many times when he was not faithful to his wife. It's in Genesis 18, he was not faithful to her. When his back was up against the wall, he told the king, oh, she's my sister. And Abimelech, the king of Gerar, this is in Genesis 20. In a dream by the night, said to him, behold, you are a dead man, because this woman you have taken is this man's wife. And Abimelech had not come near her. And he said to the Lord, you will not slay a righteous nation also, will you? Did you not say to me, she is my sister? And even she herself said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart, I'm innocent. And God said into him, dream, yes, I know that you did this in integrity of your heart. That's why I'm withholding the sin from you. Therefore, I did not touch her. Abraham and Sarah both, when push came to shove, didn't make the grade. But it still was a promise. Just because we don't make the grade and fall down once doesn't mean we don't get up and go again. And in the end, they both fulfilled the promise. They kept true to themselves. So this gives me hope. In Genesis 20, that Abraham had his wrinkles and his flaws, and so did Sarah, but they became the mother and the father of the faithful. Thank you.
Ken?
Hi. I really appreciate these studies. I'd like to know how to get the studies. Does somebody email? I mean, we can go back and review them. Do they send the links, or how do we get them? And then I really appreciate your presentation. Tagore. I had to stop and look so I said your name right.
Thank you, Ken. Go ahead if you have any further comment.
Yeah, and I didn't hear any addressing, because I know the churches of God were originally began in the belief that the Anglo-Saxon, European, Western nations were actually the seed of, from the 12 tribes, put it that way. Do they still hold to that? Or do you hold that most of them, and I know that those that are not of those seed are by faith, it's imputed to them as well. I understand that. But I was just wondering if you could address that. Listen.
Yeah, can I reserve my comment towards the end? Let others comment on your question first on British Israelism. I have my own thoughts on that. I will come a little bit later. Thank you.
About the presentations, they're on our YouTube channel. I put the link to the YouTube channel in the chat room. You can cut and paste it. Or you can go to thinkgod, ThinkGod.org. That's our website. And click
Okay.
on the presentations tab on the top. Or on the sidebar, past presentations. That'll take you to our YouTube channel. Tagore also has these on his website also. So go ahead, Alan.
You want to go?
Can you pull up Galatians 3 for me, please?
Yeah,
Mute it, honey?
sharing my screen.
God.org. That's all we need.
Did you mute it?
So Galatians 3.
Yeah.
Which
I'm only
verse?
going to look at 14 and 16.
God.org. That's
And this has to do with in your seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed through Jesus Christ. And here we read in verse 14 that the blessing of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through Jesus Christ, that we might receive the promise of the Spirit through faith. In verse 16, and to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He said, not unto many seeds, but as to one, and to thy seed, which is Christ. So those are pretty important in the understanding of the long-reaching arm of prophecy from the time Abraham was promised that all the nations shall be blessed. Here we see part of that explained through Christ is which is the cause of all the blessing. So I'll just leave it there for now. I know there's other hands up, so I got some other things that I'll add later. Thanks.
Robin?
So, what is the significance of God telling Abraham, Isaac, your son, your only son, when clearly he had Ishmael also?
Yeah, I can answer that. If anybody else wants to answer that, I want them to go first, and eventually I will come back, Robin. Sorry.
I've got a comment on it. That's because the promise is made to Sarah. It was promised directly to Sarah. It wasn't promised to any other woman. The promise had to come through her seed. That's how that was done. If she didn't matter, she was just a footnote. Then you could say, well, okay, let's do the firstborn. No, it had to be the firstborn of the promise. And that's Sarah.
Well, when he originally made the promise, he was speaking to Abraham, and clearly he was married to Sarah, so one would assume. But God never directed that promise to Sarah until afterward, when he said, no, no, I'm not going to just bless Ishmael. I will give you a son through Sarah. Like that was a promise made to Sarah, made regarding Sarah after Ishmael was already born. When he spoke to,
when Abraham came, when Yahweh came to visit Abraham in the desert, and they broke bread together, and Sarah was there, and she laughed. And he made her a direct promise to her face alone. To her. It wasn't in front of Abraham. She's not a footnote. That's how I take it. Thank you.
That answer your question, Robin?
I mean, I get that, but there, I guess there's a, I'm looking for, like, words mean something. And I have a hard time when it says, in this case, he uses the word only, when it's not an only son. It's the only one through Sarah, but it's not his only son. And I guess the reason that I find it a little difficult is because that's the same terminology used of Jesus, the only begotten son. Well, was there another one before him that didn't receive the promise? Like, is there a parallel there? It just seems a little odd to me that he would use the same terminology. But in Abraham's case, there actually was another son. It just wasn't the one that God chose.
Yeah, there's a will of flesh and will of God or promise of God. That is the fundamental distinction. In a way, Ishmael is illegitimate son, not from wife. Even that, I think, probably not the objection. Objection is they want to fulfill God's promises by their own thinking, by their own thoughts. Will of flesh is the product is Ishmael. That is the main objection. Instead of waiting is faith. Promises of God, the promised seed is the official one God has in mind all through. But he withheld sending Isaac for so long, and they're getting older and older and older. So their faith is tested and trained and strengthened. And then he gives Isaac, your only begotten son, in that context. You might say, why not Ishmael, his begotten son? He was also begotten, but not through Sarah. Again, you go back to covenant. The marriage is between Abraham and Sarah. That's a covenant, is based on that covenant. It's a play of words and multiple layers, the way God writes. I know your answer appears to be simple, but the answer, unfortunately, cannot meet with simple words. It takes longer time, Robin, to explain all the typology and the layers and why God has to write things that way. I don't know, but apparently it seems that he's writing in a multi-layered way. That's my probably unsatisfactory explanation. I'm done.
No, it's not unsatisfactory to say that there's extra layers, and that's actually probably the only way to get a satisfactory answer for it. I tend to be such a black and white thinker. Like I have a very difficult time teasing through some things that are nuanced when it seems like that nuanced meaning is actually a contradiction. Like my brain just starts to cry when I get to that point, because I can't tease it out. I can't make it make sense in my head.
Uh,
And so I kind of hit a wall of frustration.
Yeah, I think that's partly due to English language limitation. If you go to Greek, it is a lot more clear, a lot more clarity. The words that are used are a particular Greek word, very strange Greek word, is called semeion. Semeion is used to most of these things in Greek New Testament. Semeion is a language of representations and symbols, types, shadows. So when he talks about Abraham, he's also talking about God the Father. When he talks about Isaac, he's also talking about Son of God. When he talks about Jacob, whose name is turned into Israel, he's talking about the whole house of Israel. And then he plays another layer. Physical Israel, flesh Israel, is a type and shadow of another Israel, the spiritual Israel. So you have multiple representations, multiple layers, but the same words, unfortunately, are used and reused. The words remain same, but the concepts revolve in multiple layers. That's where the semeion really what it means. And Greek thunders with semeion, and you lose it all in English. That could be part of the problem, and that's where we have to learn to live with what word of God is given to us, I believe. I'm done.
Again, that's the reason I said it was a promise made unto Sarah. It was a covenant made unto Sarah. If she didn't matter, Ishmael would have worked. But it was a promise made to the couple. It wasn't made to an individual. That's what's being shared here. When the two become one, let them not be separated. They are man and wife in a godly relationship is exactly talking to an individual. If you promise something to a one, you have promised to the other one. And that promise was not made to Hagar. It was made to Sarah. It's a big deal. She is the mother of the righteous, as it said in the book of Revelation, book of Galatians says. And it's a big deal. And that's the reason Paul was getting in trouble with a lot of the Jews. They had God in a box. They owned him. And the rest of all the society couldn't have any unless they bought it from the Jews. Well, that's not the way it works. It's through the words of Christ you enter the covenant. It's not any other way. It's not by cutting the foreskins of your organ off. Thank you.
I think Tom mentioned a verse for Robin. Just I want to go there. Which verse, Tom, do you want to go? Genesis 18, verse 10.
Yeah, verse 10 does answer it. I actually missed that as a direct promise regarding Sarah.
Okay.
So that was I think the most direct one that I could find.
Okay.
Okay, you guys move on. Thank you.
But I just want to say one thing. Women are not second class of the promises of God. The promise made to Mary was to directly a woman. No man was involved. And that was the promise that the Messiah could enter this planet. And she said, okay, let it be done. She didn't ask her dad. She didn't ask her brother. She didn't ask her fiance. It was a direct promise made to a woman. It's a big deal.
Jim?
Hi, 2 points. One, a follow-up to Alan. Alan, when you read through there, talking about the promise of the Christ, I mean, God basically said here, Genesis 18, The only way you can be in covenant with me is to be a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yes, you could be adopted in. We understand all the things that were put in there, but for close to 1,500 years, the only way that you could be in covenant with God was to have a direct physical genetic relationship to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or be adopted into that. And it was made the promise sometime in the future that will change. And that's sort of what Acts 2 and the other things we're talking about. So I think that's a really big point, that that was the promise that was made. And it was even stipulated that it will change when the Messiah comes. The second point, let's talk controversial British Israelism. Anyone who's read Allen knows that he was writing in the 1850s, and he's taking a look and saying, hey, the end times are here. Jesus is coming back anytime soon. And there's no Israel. Where's Israel? Jesus can't come back unless there's Israel. And so he took a look and said, there you go. I have Israel. And he painted it out in his genetic picture of British Israelism. And I have no problem with that in the 1850s. But in the 1950s, the nation of Israel came about, and it sprang an entire new religious movement called Messianic Judaism, where a lot of Jews were like, oh man, it's been 2,000 years and Israel is now here. Maybe this guy Yeshua actually was the Messiah. And we have a lot of people who are part of the BI movement taking a look and going, oh yeah, there's this nation of Israel right now there in the middle of the Holy Land, where all the prophecies are supposed to take place, but they're just Jews. They're not really Israelites. For me, that's where British Israelism loses me, because you have a nation that was there and is part of prophecy right where it was supposed to be. You have all these people going, yeah, they don't really count because they're just Jews. Controversial enough? I'll let it go from there.
Don?
Okay, I just wanted to point out something. Actually, the presentation was very good, and I don't want to try to take anything away from the presentation. I just want to add something that I think is astonishing in itself. If you think about all of the scriptures that we've been reading, they're all tied to a time element. Abraham was 75, right? He was 100 years old when Isaac was born. Isaac would be under duress for 400 years. These statements of time are in your Bible, and they have to be accurate, and they are actually proven accurate. I'll just to give you a little understanding of this. The 40th verse of Exodus 12 says, 430 years to the day. Not 430 years to the year or the month, but to the day. Something happened 430 years prior to the exact same day. And that day was the day that Israel was leaving Egypt. Someone else was leaving someplace else on that exact same day, 430 years earlier. And that was Abraham. And so, and you can put the whole thing together, because he was 75 years old when he left. Isaac was born at 100. He was weaned at age 5. And that's when the duress really started, because his half brother, who was at that point in time 19, I believe, was making sexual remarks about him, and that's why Sarah said, they got to go. We can't have this competition with the son of promise. And so it was from that point on that Isaac was under duress, and you can see this all the way through his life. He was under duress, and basically the nation was under that duress. So you can put it together, and it's exact to the day, and it just shows that God does things on time, not just guesswork, but actually right on time, and he backs it up with scripture. And that in effect is another proof of the Bible, that it is absolutely accurate. There is well, Isaac was a type of Christ, and the typology was astonishing. That's another whole subject, could take up a whole hour, but these are important little things that God has given to us as proof of what he has given us. It's astonishing.
Crystal's iPad?
My hand is still up.
I said Crystal's iPad.
Yeah, it's just so multifaceted. The whole concept of the mother of promise was a big enough deal that Paul brought it up in the book of Galatians. If it was just the father of promise, it wouldn't have mattered, but it was a mother of promise. And it's very interesting that both of these events were made to women directly through a promise, separate from, I mean, just specifically to them. Isaac, which is the type of Christ, and the real McCoy, the real Messiah. Both were made by promise. Both were made by covenant. Both were made directly to women. And I think it's real easy to write women out of scripture, but you can't do it. You can't do it. I'm very happy for godly women. Probably the reason that we're still around. Thank you.
Ken?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the wait. Okay, what verse was that where what was it? He said I can't remember who it was about a sexual remark that Ishmael made. What passage on what part of a Genesis? I'm in Genesis 21 now. I'm looking for it. Let's see here. That was before Abraham was told to offer up Isaac, I think. Let's see. Okay, where you at? And he said, I will let's see. I'm looking. Okay, I'm looking what you're.
What's the context? Which subject are you addressing?
I'm wanting to know where the verse is that where Ishmael mocked, made a sexual remark. I've never heard that before. What verse is that? And okay, Abraham.
I'll search.
That's right. Okay.
Hagar, or Ishmael. We'll find that.
Yeah, ask the person who made the comment to
Yeah.
explain it.
Yeah, it was Don. Where
What
was
verse?
that, Don, that they had that about the comment that was made?
Yeah, what verse? I just need to know the verse, and I want to see a different translation. And took door. No.
Oh, let me see. Hagar and Ishmael.
Just
Isaac
before,
born.
before Sarah said, "Get rid of that guy."
Yeah, that's right.
Huh.
That's
What
that's
verse
what
is
we're
that?
looking for.
Oh, here we are. That's in chapter verse 14. So let me go on. I'm really curious. So Abraham rose early in the morning, took.
If you that word that's used there that he uses, if you go back
What verse?
to
What verse is that?
what chapter were you in there?
20.
Oh yeah, depart. All right, okay.
20 or 21.
Okay, and Abraham called name Isaac, circumcised.
Are you looking for where Ishmael
Made
was
the remark.
mocking the boy?
Yeah.
Okay, the only thing that I see is, but Sarah saw the son of Hagar. Oh no, I'm sorry, I've got the wrong one.
But what verse are we at?
That's what they're trying.
Hang on, Ken, we're looking.
Oh, okay.
Just
I think you're looking at.
Okay, no, it's Genesis 21, starting in verse 8, it says, and the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on that day that Isaac was weaned. Verse 9, but Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing, which is what it says in ESV. Mocking is what it says in the King James. And then she said, cast out the slave woman and her son.
If
But
you
the
look
word,
up,
that
if
word
you look up-
mocking,
Where did it? I don't see the sexual remark.
Well, that's.
no, I don't see a sexual remark there either. It's
Okay.
just laughing or making sport of or mocking.
okay, now what you have to do is you have to look up that word scoffing. And you'll find that same word is used in Leviticus when it's talking about sexual deviance.
Well, yes, but it's also used, it's the same word that is used when Abraham laughed when God said he was going to have a son. So it doesn't only have a sexual connotation.
Well,
It's the
in
same
this
exact,
case,
it's the
in
same
this
exact
case-
word, and it is the base word of Isaac. The word is Sakak, Tsakak. But it's the same base. So it doesn't only have a mocking or a scornful, it can also be to laugh in joy or merriment.
Well,
and
if
you
that-
think that Sarah would have kicked them out of if he was just laughing joyfully about his.
Oh, sure.
rival?
I don't say that it doesn't mean mocking. I'm just saying that it doesn't necessarily mean mocking, and it certainly, I don't see that it has any specific connection to a sexual remark.
Well, I think that that's a possibility, though. I want to look that up more myself, and
Here it says.
it does sound very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the boy was just being weaned. He was probably 3 or 4 years old.
5.
Yes, 5. I think Tagore said he was 5 years old.
Well, I don't know where it says that, but it doesn't.
Well,
That's kind of beside the
math-
point. He wasn't like
math-
a underdeveloped teenager.
The math.
but Ishmael
adds
wasn't.
it.
Well, was.
He's at least 13. 13 plus.
Yeah, so he was
It's the-
puberty by then, and he,
I think so we can move on, we can establish that there was friction here that was
yes,
not good, and it was the cause for the separation. Whether it was sexual or teasing or laughing or whatever, comments were made, an attitude was presented, and out Ishmael went. Right?
okay, sure.
Okay. Jim?
Hi, just a little follow-up on, women and the promises and women's role in the church. Just a personal story here. I believe I'm a decent speaker. I'm a pretty good researcher, and I can't sing for squat. I love music and I can't sing for squat, where my lovely wife has perfect pitch and is a really good leader of song. And in the churches of God, they kept getting me to try and lead songs. And the idea of my wife leading songs was absolutely verboten. I will tell you that because of personal experience, I've changed, and I don't believe that women should be preaching from the pulpit because they have a tendency to be soft on their children, softer than men will be when they've gone off and gone into heresy. Personal heresy on my part. But I will say that I think that the idea of not having a woman lead songs, even though they're much better singers because they're not men, shows an incredible prejudice, an incredible put down of gifts that God has given people, especially when they try to make people like me lead songs. Just personal experience from the churches of God, and I'll let it go at that.
Yeah, I was gonna say this could drift into a really nasty area, and it really is not directly related to the topic. It
And
could
I-
be a rabbit trail, but
And I
I-
understand, and you may not want to go there. I'm just saying, since it was brought up a number of times, promises made to women, and that women are a big part of the covenant. And I agree with that totally. And I'll let it go at that. Thank you, Don.
okay. Someone else had their hand up, and I don't remember who it was besides Tagore.
It's me.
Okay,
I want anybody has insight into Yahweh, Elohim, and El Shaddai. I would like to hear a little bit later after we are done with Alan.
Oh, yeah, I'd like to pull up Isaiah chapter 51. There's some things mentioned here about those who follow after righteousness. Such an interesting phrase to say. Listen up, you who follow after righteousness. I guess you would have to see yourself that way, wouldn't you? You'd have to consider yourself and esteem yourself as one who does follow after righteousness. So listen to me. I'm verse 1 and 2. Listen to me, you that follow after righteousness, you that seek the Lord. Look unto the rock from whence you were hewn, into the hole of the pit whence you were digged. Look unto Abraham, your father, and to Sarah that bore you. For I called him alone and blessed him and increased him. So the message in the beginning of this chapter is, look to the man that was the faithful man, and to Sarah, the faithful woman. The hole of the pit from whence you were digged. What is this? What's he saying here? He's saying the source that you came from. Look, Israel. Look at your foundation person, Abraham. Look at his example. I think that's the crux of what's being said here. There's an example for you. Look at it. look at how wonderful the example is and emulate that. I called him alone. Wow. Come out of her, my people. You are called alone when you answer that call. And you are blessed. And I blessed him and increased him. You are increased in your spiritual understanding and your love for God and your commitment and your faithfulness. So look to Abraham was really important when this was written. And it carried through afterwards for many, many people, I feel. It's a deeply inspiring verse. I'm done.
Chris, still his iPad?
One second. One second. When Christ was in his ministry, he actually was threatened to be stoned to death. On one occasion, one guy says, why do we need you? We have Abraham as our father. Who are you? And so when you say, look unto Abraham, you have to say, look at Abraham's faith, not because of the flesh. You can't just say, I inherit because my daddy had. My grandfather was J.D. Rockefeller. Well, so what? If you don't walk according to faith, you don't get the blessings. Thank you.
Yeah, Phil, and I think that's exactly what this verse is saying. Look at his example. Look what he did when he was told to come out. I called him alone. What a wonderful, wonderful blessing to have a man like Abraham as an example in the Old Testament. If you lived in those times, if you were a young man growing up and hearing the story about Abraham coming out and hearing about what he did and the markers of his faith, it would have been such a great blessing. I think when it says, in you shall all the nations be blessed, there were other blessings before Christ came on the scene, such as looking at his example. So yeah, Phil, you're exactly right. It's his faith that we look at.
We look at the book of Hebrews 11. And if somebody could go down through that and read that in light of the covenants, all the way back to Abel. And it's not an esoteric faith. It's not I just believe. No, Abel believed the Messiah was coming. Abraham believed in a city far off and a promise. And that city was Zion, the city of God, where Christ himself would be the king. That's what Abraham believed. And that's the only reason it was righteousness to him. It was Messiah was the one that he believed in. Thank you.
Alan?
Maybe that's me. Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what Alan was saying about the faith of Abraham, because Abraham is our father, as the father of faith, and that reminds me of Genesis 26 verse 5, and it shows that Abraham demonstrated his faith, but what he did, right? I mean, he left, he went to the promised land and so forth. And in Genesis 26:5, it says, because Abraham obeyed my voice, kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So he demonstrated his faith by obeying what the Lord was telling him to do. And even if the law wasn't codified yet, wasn't written yet, he obeyed all the instructions that God gave him. So he demonstrated his faith by obedience to all of this. I'm done.
Okay, Dan, did you have your hand up and it was down and then up and then down again? Or am I seeing things?
Actually, you were seeing things because it was up and down, but I think my comment would have taken us in a little bit of a rabbit trail. So I put the hand down, and officially it is down now.
Okay, I know sometimes being on the phone, you don't know if it's up or down. Okay, very good. Eileen?
Hi. Thank you, Tigor, for the very informative and good presentation. And just it when you ask about Abraham's faith, I remember in the New Testament. Sorry, there's a chapter or some verses that gives, and the title is Hall of Faith. Father, I'm not sure if the father of the Hall of Faith, but it begins with Abraham, and then it tells about the others who followed after him. And it just shows how, even up to now, he is the model. And it does not, and at that time, he had the faith, and that is the beginning, the seed of everything, is to step in faith. And missionaries now also look at it from that point. And even us who maybe some, for example, come from the city where everything is comfort, and that was where Abraham was, in his comfort zone, in his family, in the city, the bustling trading city. And yet the Lord asked him to step in faith, go out to somewhere you don't know. You just step, and each step is a step of faith. And that reminds us that there are times, and we step out in faith. And just like Tigor moving out back from India and going to India and back to US, and with Alan going from your comfort zone, although it's cold, now you have Florida, which is what's nicer. So there are moments in our lives that we step in faith, not just it's even physical. And for missionaries, that's a big deal. I've heard missionaries going to the tribes, and they are being poisoned, and the tribes people are saying, we have poisoned them several times, why aren't they dead yet? So it's really like eating something, there's poison, and you just have to step in faith that you will not die from that poison. So these are what the pioneering missionaries are doing in the tribal areas. And we thank the Lord that they are there and doing the work that we can only imagine how challenging that is. So I thank you for I thank the Lord for our faith is still being pushed and pushed to, and we have Abraham to look at. And just imagine, what if martyrdom is not given yet, but the evil people will say, we'll kill your children if you don't change your faith. So we have to be strong in our faith that this is all temporary. So thank you.
Any other comments? Otherwise, we let Tagore continue commenting. Oh, more. Alan.
Yeah, Tagore, can you turn over to Genesis 22? This word, this phrase, afar off, is very intriguing because it's found also in Hebrews 11. In verse 5, we see this. I'm sorry, in verse 4, we see, then on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes, and he saw the place afar off. Remember when Jesus Christ says, Abraham saw my day and was glad. These words afar off, they indicate something at a distance, but is not yet. It's a visionary statement of a future event. And that's what we see in Hebrews 11:13, if we can go over there. In Hebrews 11. And 13, these all died in faith. Abraham died in faith. Abraham did not receive the promises of inheritance of land. But having seen them, these promises afar off. I love that statement because that's you and I. This is it to inspire us to see the promise that's yet afar off. So when Abraham looked and he saw the place of sacrifice afar off, I take that and I think this is language that being found right here in verse 13. Having seen the promises afar off. What a wonderful, wonderful match for that verse. And he was persuaded, wasn't he? It says that he knew that he was able to raise him from the dead. He was persuaded of the promises. And he embraced them and confessed. So I just wanted to bring that afar off. Seeing things afar off. That was for the patriarchs who all saw that they all saw things afar off that were promises. And you and I also see of things that are yet to come. Forward-looking people is what we are. That's it. I'm done.
That's far out, man.
Ken?
Sorry, I didn't know I had my hand up.
Okay. Stan?
Yeah, Alan, picking up on your afar off idea, I was always intrigued by Hebrews 11:35, breaking into a thought where it says, women received their dead raised to life again, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. And I've often wondered, did they know more about the resurrection than we think they did? Or is Paul using this phrase, maybe loosely speaking? I don't know. I'm done.
Bristol's iPad.
Well, back in Hebrews 11, Sarah's brought up again. She's singled out. She singled out Sarah. Why was she singled out for her faith? If you want to go back up to Sarah. She judged him faithful. She did the same thing Abraham did. They were matched bookends. She's a mother of faith. If he's the father of faith, she's the mother of faith. Through faith herself received strength to conceive the seed. And was delivered this child when she was way past her prime age, her use by date. And she judged him faithful who had made the promise. And that just asked me, do we really believe that the promises that Yahweh's made, he really will do? We judge him do we judge him faithful? Or we'll just wait and see. We'll just wait and see. Or do we judge him faithful? What he says will happen. Not might happen, will happen. Did we judge him faithful? Thank you.
Ken?
My wife's a little bit shy, but she's going to try to ask a question. So this is Christine talking. Go ahead, honey.
Well, there's two things I want to address. Sarah said to Abraham, take Hagar. Maybe the son's supposed to come through Hagar. And then God told Abraham to listen to Sarah. And so she kind of gave away she knew it was going to be her, through her. But she kind of sold her privilege to have the son with Abraham. Okay, that's one part. Then when Jacob and his mother, was that Rebecca? Or was that Rachel? I think it's Rebecca.
Yes.
Took Jacob and dressed him to smell and feel like Esau. And he was chosen for the birthright. God said to Jacob, because you did this, you will have your name hidden, and this will happen to you. That the same thing's going to happen to you. And this is what's happening now with Israel, which is not Israel, but Israeli. Everyone thinks that Israeli is Israel, when it is not. So this is the time that God has taken Jacob's name, which is Israel, and hidden it, so people don't know that this is not Israel. They think it is. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Dan wanted a comment on verse 35 of Hebrews 11. Woman received their dead, raised again to life, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. It's open to the room.
Chris's iPad.
I think that people during the time of the Old Covenant, they understood there was a resurrection, but they also probably knew that there was a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. I don't think that they were looking at it like there's more than one resurrection. But I can't prove that. So the better resurrection is the one for the righteous and not for the wicked, if you contrast those two, one against the other. So Jesus Christ says, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah the prophet, whom you killed between the porch and the altar, fill up your wickedness and kill me too, like you're planning to do. That's what he meant when he said it. So this Zechariah and Abel, that they had a hope in a resurrection of the righteous, and they did not take deliverance. You don't see Abel trying to kill his brother Cain and protect himself. It was as if his brother either did it by surprise or he did it through brute strength, whatever it was. Abel didn't seem to fight back. There's no evidence of that. Zechariah and all the other prophets that were slain in between those two, they went to a better resurrection because they went to their death. They died in faith, right? These all died in faith. I'm just thinking out loud, that's all.
Crystal's iPad.
So I would tend to agree with you. They received their dead, raised again to life. I wonder about that translation. They escaped with their skin. I'd like to see that somebody knows a little bit more about the wording. Is they escaped by the hair of their teeth, and others didn't. They were tortured and accepted a better resurrection, to a better life. So do you escape to a fleshly life and get out of there and don't get keep your scalp, or do you get scalped and have eternity in a resurrected better life? I'd like to see that comment if that's what the Greek says.
Well, it says woman received by raising again their dead. So it's kind of resurrection to flesh and blood life. But others were tortured, not accepting their redemption, that a better rising again that they might receive. So resurrection to eternal life versus resurrection to flesh and blood life is one possibility of understanding this verse. But the other possibility Alan proposed was resurrection of just versus resurrection of unjust. So better resurrection would be a resurrection of just. So there could be other ways to read this verse.
Well, in the book of James, it says that the prayer of the faithful will strengthen the knees or cause the people to rise again. And the analogy there is getting healed from sickness.
The plea bargain was that we would drop 2 of the 6
And so
charges.
my question is this the receiving their rising of the dead, are they just getting healed?
Would run consecutively, not concurrently.
Thank you.
With both women pleading to the same charges, the plea deal makes no distinction between the co-defendant's roles in the abuse. Although, in recognition of Ruby's cooperation in the case, prosecutors
Sandra, you need to mute.
regarding the terms of her parole. Ruby's plea deal said that she would testify against Jody, and we would not go.
Any other comments?
There is one more parallel that I haven't really thought of until tonight, and that is this miracle birth of a woman who is past age has a parallel in Elizabeth bearing John the Baptist. They were both, John the Baptist's parents were past the childbearing age. And a righteous man is born of them who is greater than all the prophets, it says. There's none greater, that he says, Jesus Christ's testimony about John the Baptist. So there is something there that can be compared in the childbearing of an aged woman and man who, by all standards, it would have been an impossibility for them. And yet a miraculous birth takes place. So there's something more there that I'm not really, I don't fully get it or understand it. It would take some time for more examination.
Jim?
So Alan, just so you know that I kind of resemble that remark. If you're well past the time of normally having children and you haven't had children and you and your wife have sex and suddenly there's a baby and you're both like 55 years old, it's kind of a shock. And what are you going to do? I'm just talking not from a spiritual aspect or a Christian aspect, but a purely human aspect, because we came close to that. And I'm just saying, sometimes you may want to think about how that occurred to them, and suddenly they realized, wow, this really is from God for us to be doing it, because this shouldn't have happened. Just my thoughts on that, because I've actually thought about it.
Yeah, it was so extraordinary that it was necessary for angel to appear to Zacharias, when he was doing his service in the temple. It was necessary in order that that their understanding of this situation, this miraculous situation, would be that there is great purpose, and that there's a meaning, a great meaning built into this pregnancy. So I was thinking about Sarah being 90, and I don't know how old Elizabeth was, but I think it says well past the age. But anyway, yeah, you're right, James. It would be such a
which
shocking.
I will assume means that she was through menopause.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well past.
Igor?
There are other places this script runs: a barren woman waiting for a son. It doesn't happen. We have Samuel's mother, Samson's mother, and there are few other places they were barren and they don't have a son or children. They wait long enough. I don't know if they're past their bearing age, but simply they won't have son, and they face through lots of stigma, criticism, and not being loved or honored by their husbands or their family or their culture. It's they endure long, and then finally God visits them. It's a visitation, and then they get a male child. These are all patterns. The same script seems to run again and again at different places. And finally, God uses that script to describe New Jerusalem, the mother of us all. She doesn't have any children. She's barren, waiting. While the other woman, the Jerusalem below, has lots of children. And finally, she gets one male child, which is Jesus Christ, Yeshua. There's some parallels run across, but somebody has to do more research and bring them together, make a good harmonization and a good sense out of it. I'm done. But do you need greater faith to still believe God that He would give the promised seed when you're turning from 70s to 80s and 80s to another decade, 90s, and 90s to 99? You're almost at the end. People would die at that age normally. And then you are expecting a son at that age. What a test of faith, probably. I'm done.
Tagore,
Yep.
this is Ken. Yeah, would you repeat what you just did about doing a study and follow you a little bit better?
Yes, somebody has to study the barren woman all across this Bible. There are several women that are barren. They
Okay.
wait for a long time. And
Mhm.
then God comes and blesses them and gives them a male child. So we see that this at several places, and somebody has to go through all these occurrences and make a sense out of them. That's what I'm saying.
I may try that. I won't guarantee it, but I'll see what I can do.
Okay, thank you.
If you maybe email me or something, give me a kind of an idea. We can talk later.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Jim?
Yeah, Tagore, as you know, before the flood, average age of human beings was 900 plus. You know, you go down through and you take a look, and you see after the flood that age has come down. And I'm just going to say, I think Sarah being 90 and having a child was unusual, but was probably not unheard of. I think that you could have still had at that time frame, because of people living to 150 or even close to 200, that it would have been unusual but not unheard of. Where in today's world, someone having a kid at 90 would be like, what? So I think when we take a look and we see 90, we need to actually interpret where that was after the flood, on the way genetics was influenced, I think, by radiation and cloud. You can go on for whatever you want, but there was no doubt that before the flood, humans lived 900 plus years, and then it came down to us living maybe 100 years. So she was still in that in-between range. That's all.
Agreed, you are right. Hera lived some 150 years or more than that. So 90 is still some kind of possible range. For us, 90 is not possible range at all. That you're right.
Dan?
Yeah, to add and or echo your comments, Jim, I thought the same thing myself a lot, and I don't think the Bible anywhere uses the phrase Sarah was past the childbearing years. I don't think it describes her that way. So I think your comment has a lot of credibility to it. I'm done.
I think New Testament tells that. Let me find that verse.
If it's there, I think it's Hebrews 11, but I'm not sure.
Can I say something? My wife just mentioned that Sarah said, "Shall I have pleasure in my Lord?" And that seems to indicate possibly that she may have been beyond childbearing years.
Yeah, it's verse 11. Hebrew 11:11.
Stan, it is Hebrews 11, verse 11. Through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. So at least in the case of Sarah, it was a supernatural event.
Yes, yes, it does say that. I stand corrected. I'm done.
No worries. Thanks.
Jim,
I believe God can do things supernaturally if he wants, but again, I'm just going to point out that even in today's world, sometimes women in their 50s and they say, hey, it's way too late to have children, that this doesn't necessarily mean that it was completely supernatural, that it could well be that she was of the age where you almost never have children, but still could. And at that point, it may be in the 90s. Do I still think that it was a supernatural event by God? Yeah, I do. But I'm just saying it may not have been as unusual to someone looking outside as we think it may be. That's all.
Igor?
Yeah, the technology is also playing different tricks. Some of the women I know, like in their 20s, they freeze their eggs. And when they come to 40s, then they use the test tube technology and get the children. So if you have late pregnancies in 40s, you run the high risk of Down syndrome and all kinds of genetic abnormalities. So they freeze their eggs in 20s. So they could still have passed their normal childbearing age. That's a little bit of rabbit trail. I'm done.
Jim?
Yeah, just a little personal story that I hope you guys laugh at because sometimes we still do. Gene and I waited until later to have children. And then God said, you're going to wait even later. And so we got acupuncture, we did all this stuff, we did all kinds of things. And we're in talking to this doctor. who is, one of these specialists in having children. And she says, and you realize that having a child past 40 greatly increases the chance of Down syndrome and other things. And she does this like 4 or 5 times. And finally, I say, I'm 40. My wife is 36. And she looks down at her charts and she goes, oh. So I'm just telling you that for us, it was one of those things that, yes, we went through acupuncture and medicine and all these other things for James and Josh to first join us. But it was, for me, I'll always remember the doctor looking down at her chart and going, oh, thus having a baby past 40 is not normal, even if you're 36. That's all.
Marlene?
Oh, that's interesting. I'm interested in Genesis 17 to go when you're talking about the 3 names of God. And I'm trying to understand when it uses the word Lord versus Almighty God versus God. To connect with this, is this God the Father as he becomes to be? Is this the Son, the Word? Or is this just God defining himself in a different way?
This is my 2 cents. I believe in those verses, the distinction is not between Son and the Father. Both could be potentially be addressed by the same titles. The title is how God is approaching the paradigm. Elohim is a generic name. Sometimes even angels are used, called Elohim. And sometimes even we are called Elohim. Christ quoted that verse from Old Testament. If ye are called Elohim, to whom the word of God has reached, why do you call me that I am blaspheming if I say I am Son of God? So Elohim is a very general word for deity, for divine. That is Elohim. So Elohim, the way God uses Elohim for himself, whenever he focuses on whole mankind, past, present, and future. That's the pattern I'm seeing. When he calls himself Yahweh, it's more personalized and more covenant based. Once you're into a covenant relationship with God, and he calls himself Yahweh, in that sense, I belong to you, you belong to me. I am your God, you are my people. Those are the ideas communicated when he uses for himself Yahweh. When he uses the title El Shaddai, which is translated Almighty God, that is, he is making some things